My name is Claire Mitchell, I'm 38 years old, and I live in Dallas, Texas. I've always considered myself a family-oriented woman, the kind of person who would put loved ones first no matter the circumstances. But the truth is, family can sometimes hurt us in ways strangers never could, and I learned that lesson the hard way during a moment that should have been filled with joy and celebration. Before I get into the story, let me just pause and say something from my heart. If you're here listening to me, it means you probably enjoy stories that are raw, real, and that remind us we're not alone in the struggles of everyday family life. That's why I want to ask you to subscribe to this channel. Not just because it helps me, but because it helps you. Every day you'll have access to new, emotional, thought-provoking stories that might feel like looking in a mirror of your own life. I promise if you subscribe you'll find comfort, reflection, and maybe even answers in each video. Now let me take you back to that night. It was a warm Saturday evening, the kind of evening where the Texas air holds onto the day's heat, but a soft breeze occasionally sweeps in to make it bearable. We were celebrating my daughter's 9th birthday in our backyard. Her name is Lily, and she's the sweetest little girl you could ever imagine. She's sensitive, shy at times, but also full of light when she feels safe. I had spent days preparing for the party. Balloons tied to the fence, fairy lights strung across the patio, and a table filled with homemade cupcakes, sandwiches, and lemonade. Family and a few close neighbors were there. My husband, Greg, was in charge of grilling burgers, while I moved between greeting guests and making sure Lily was having the time of her life. I wanted everything to be perfect because birthdays matter to children in a way adults sometimes forget. They remember every detail, who showed up, who smiled, and who made them feel special. That night should have been one of Lily's happiest memories. But instead, it turned into one of my most painful. Halfway through the party, Lily was running toward the picnic table with a paper plate in her hands. The grass was a little damp from an earlier sprinkler session, and her small foot slipped. She tumbled forward, scraping her knee on the ground. It wasn't a dramatic fall, just the kind of little accident kids have all the time. But when she looked up, embarrassed and holding back tears, what she saw, and what I saw, broke my heart. My oldest sister, Diane, stood there with a glass of wine in her hand, laughing. Not just a chuckle, not a nervous giggle, but a full, loud laugh that carried across the yard. "Oh my God, she's such a klutz," she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. The yard went silent. My daughter's eyes filled with tears, and she looked at me as though she was waiting for me to save her. That's when something inside me snapped. I stood up, my hands trembling not with fear, but with a kind of anger I rarely let out. I walked toward my sister, and in that moment, I didn't care that all eyes were on me. I didn't care that this was supposed to be a party. I cared only about my daughter, her dignity, her feelings, her trust in me as her mother. I looked Diane straight in the eyes and said one sentence. Just one. And with those words, the entire atmosphere of the party shifted, and within minutes, it was over. But before I tell you exactly what I said, let me pause again. If you're still listening, I want to invite you once more to subscribe to this channel. Think of it this way. Every time you hit that button, you're making sure you never miss a story that could change how you see your own family, your relationships, even yourself. You'll have daily moments of connection, moments that remind you you're not the only one facing complicated family dynamics. Don't let these stories just pass you by. Be part of them with me. Back to that moment. My voice was calm, but my words were sharp, deliberate, and impossible to take back. I told Diane something that not only silenced her but also left everyone else in the yard frozen in place. The silence that followed was heavier than the Texas heat. Diane's smirk faded instantly, her face turning red as she realized everyone was looking at her now, not laughing with her but judging her. Within minutes, people started making excuses to leave. The laughter, the chatter, the music. All of it died. The party was over, and so was the illusion that my sister and I were still close. What I said that night wasn't planned. It came from a place of pain, love for my daughter, and years of tension with Diane that had been building under the surface. And that's where I'll leave this part of the story. In the next part, I'll share the exact words I used, the reaction they caused, and how that night didn't just end a birthday party. It ended something much bigger. But before we go, let me say this one last thing. If you've ever been in a situation where family made you feel small, unheard, or disrespected, these stories will resonate with you deeply. Subscribe now, because what's coming next might feel like a piece of your own life, told through mine. And trust me, you won't want to miss it. I remember standing there, staring at Diane, with Lily still sitting on the grass holding her scraped knee. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear the murmur of people around me. Every instinct as a mother told me to protect my daughter, but another voice inside me whispered, "If you stay quiet now, Lily will think it's okay for people to humiliate her, even family." So I took a deep breath and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Diane, if you think laughing at a child's pain makes you look strong, it doesn't. It just shows how small you really are." The words sliced through the warm night air like a knife. For a second, no one moved. My sister's face froze in shock, her mouth slightly open as if she couldn't believe I had actually said that in front of everyone. Then, as the silence grew heavier, she put down her glass of wine and tried to laugh it off. "Oh, come on, Claire, don't be so dramatic," she said, forcing a smile. But it was too late, the damage was done. I knelt beside Lily, helped her up, and brushed the grass from her dress. Her little hands clung to mine, and I could feel her body trembling. That was when I realized how deeply that moment had cut her. She wasn't crying from the scraped knee. She was crying because her own aunt had made her feel like a joke. I turned to the guests, my voice steady but cold. "I think the party's over. Thanks for coming." One by one, people began gathering their things, awkwardly avoiding eye contact. Some mumbled polite goodbyes. Others left silently. Within 15 minutes, the backyard was empty except for the decorations still swaying in the evening breeze. Greg looked at me with a mixture of pride and concern, while Diane stood off to the side, glaring at me as though I had ruined her evening. She eventually stormed out without saying another word. That night, after Lily was tucked into bed, I sat on the porch staring at the dim glow of the fairy lights we had strung earlier. The silence was deafening compared to the laughter that had filled the yard only hours before. And all I could think about was how something as small as a laugh, a cruel, careless laugh, had exposed cracks in my family that had been there for years. But before I go further, let me pause here. If you've ever had a moment in your life when you spoke up and everything changed, whether for better or worse, you know how powerful words can be. That's why I encourage you to subscribe to this channel. These stories are not just about me. They are about all of us who face painful family dynamics and try to find the strength to confront them. By subscribing, you'll always have a place where your experiences feel seen and validated. The truth is, Diane and I had a long history. Her laugh that night wasn't just about Lily falling. It was about years of her undermining me, competing with me, and making little comments meant to cut me down. Growing up, Diane was always the golden child. My parents praised her for everything, while I was often compared and told to try harder. She became the confident, glamorous one, and I became the quiet, responsible one. When I got married and had Lily, I thought maybe things would change. I thought Diane would soften, maybe even become the fun, loving aunt every child deserves. But instead, she carried that same superiority into adulthood. She would criticize my parenting, my house, even the way I dressed. I swallowed my pride most of the time, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. But that night, that laugh at Lily's expense, it was the last straw. Greg sat beside me on the porch and said, "You know she's going to call tomorrow and act like nothing happened, right?" I nodded, staring out into the yard. "Not this time. I'm done pretending." And I meant it. For the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of relief. Pain, yes, but also relief. Because I finally chose my daughter's dignity over keeping peace with my sister. Still, I knew this wasn't the end of it. Diane wasn't the type to just walk away. And I was right. The next morning the phone rang. It was Diane. And what she said left me speechless. Not because she apologized, but because she doubled down in a way I never saw coming. Before I share that part, let me say this. Don't miss what happens next. If you're watching this, hit that subscribe button now. Every new part of this story will reveal a layer of family tension and hidden truths you won't want to miss. These are real, raw situations that might even mirror something you've gone through. Don't let the story slip away. Stay with me. In the next part, I'll tell you about that phone call, the cruel words Diane used, and how it forced me to make one of the hardest decisions of my adult life. But for now, I'll leave you with this. Sometimes the end of a party is just the beginning of a reckoning. The morning after Lily's birthday, I woke up feeling like the air was heavier than usual. The balloons were still tied to the fence, half deflated, and the paper plates from the party sat in a trash bag by the back door. The celebration that was supposed to bring joy now looked more like a battlefield after a storm. I was sipping my first cup of coffee when the phone rang. I didn't even need to look at the caller ID. I knew it was Diane. A part of me wanted to let it ring, but another part of me knew that avoiding her would only make things worse. Answered. "Claire," she said sharply, skipping any greeting. "What the hell was that last night?" Her tone wasn't remorseful. It wasn't even defensive. It was angry, as if I had humiliated her in front of everyone, not the other way around. I took a deep breath. "What that was," I replied, "was me protecting my daughter. You crossed a line, Diane. You laughed at Lily like she was a joke. She's 9 years old. What kind of person does that?" She scoffed. "Oh please. Kids fall. It's funny. You're overreacting as usual. You always have to play the martyr. It's exhausting, Claire." Her words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I felt my throat tighten, not from doubt, but from the realization that my sister truly didn't see anything wrong with what she had done. "You embarrassed her," I said firmly. "You embarrassed me. And you did it in front of everyone. If you can't see why that's wrong, then I don't know what else to say." There was a pause on the other end. Then Diane's voice dropped, colder, sharper. "You made me look bad last night. You humiliated me. Don't expect me to just let that go. If you want this family to stay together, you're the one who owes me an apology." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it, but my chest hurt too much for laughter. I realized then that Diane wasn't just unwilling to apologize. She was trying to flip the situation, to make me feel guilty for standing up for my daughter. That's when I said something I had never dared say to her before. "Diane, I don't care if you never speak to me again. What I care about is Lily never feeling worthless because of you. If that means cutting ties, so be it." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, with a bitter chuckle, Diane said, "Wow. You really think you're better than me, don't you? Fine. Have it your way." And she hung up. I set the phone down, my hands trembling. My chest was heavy, but at the same time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. Greg walked into the kitchen, holding his own mug of coffee. "That was Diane, wasn't it?" he asked, reading my face instantly. He nodded. "She thinks I owe her an apology." He shook his head, setting his mug on the counter. "She's never going to change, Claire. You've spent your whole life trying to keep the peace with her. Maybe it's time to stop." I knew he was right, but it hurt. Because as toxic as Diane could be, she was still my sister. There were memories of childhood sleepovers, secrets whispered under the covers, long summers spent riding bikes around the neighborhood. Cutting her out of my life felt like tearing out a part of myself. But then I thought of Lily. Her little eyes filled with tears when Diane laughed at her. The way she clung to me like I was her only safe place. And I knew. My daughter's well-being mattered more than any nostalgic loyalty to a sister who had never truly respected me. And this is where I want to pause for a second and talk directly to you. Maybe you've had someone in your family who constantly makes you feel small, who turns everything around and makes you the villain when you finally stand up for yourself. If you have, then you know how lonely it feels. That's why I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel. 'Cause here you're not alone. These stories are not just my stories. They're reflections of struggles so many of us face but rarely talk about. By subscribing, you're joining a community that understands. The rest of that day was tense. I tried to focus on Lily, making her pancakes with extra chocolate chips, reminding her that she was loved and cherished. She smiled, but I could see the shadow lingering in her eyes. Children remember when adults laugh at them. It plants seeds of insecurity that take years to undo. That night, after Lily went to bed, Greg and I sat at the kitchen table. He reached for my hand and said, "So, what happens now with Diane?" I stared at the wood grain on the table, my mind racing. "I don't know. But I think I need to stop letting her hurt us. I don't want Lily growing up thinking it's normal to let someone walk all over you just because they're family." Greg nodded slowly. "Then we draw the line." And that's exactly what I decided to do. But little did I know, Diane wasn't going to back away quietly.
Well,
she had her own way of striking back, and her next move would cause a rift in the family bigger than anything I had ever imagined. Before I leave you here, let me just say this. If you've been following my story and you want to know how it unfolds, don't forget to subscribe. What comes next is not just drama. It's the unraveling of family bonds, and it might sound painfully familiar to you. Don't miss it. Stay with me. I wish I could say Diane let things cool down after that phone call, but that would be a lie. My sister has always thrived on control, of conversations, of people's opinions, of the narrative itself. And when I refused to bend to her version of events, she did what she has always done. She tried to turn the rest of the family against me. It started with my mom. 2 days after the birthday party, she called me. Her voice was hesitant, but I could already hear Diane's words echoing in the background of the conversation. "Claire," Mom began, "Diane told me what happened. She said you embarrassed her in front of everyone. Was it really necessary to say what you did? You know how sensitive she can be." I nearly dropped the phone. Sensitive. That was the word my mom chose. Diane had humiliated my daughter, and somehow the concern was for Diane's feelings. "Mom," I said carefully, trying to hold back the frustration boiling inside me. "Lily fell. She was hurt and embarrassed." Diane laughed at her. "Do you think that's okay?" There was a pause. "Well, kids fall all the time," Mom replied. "Maybe Diane shouldn't have laughed, but you didn't need to escalate it. Family is all we have, Claire. You shouldn't make enemies out of your sister." Her words stung more than I expected. It wasn't the first time I felt like my mom excused Diane's behavior, but hearing it now after what happened felt like betrayal. That evening, my younger brother Mark texted me. "Heard about the party. Honestly, you kinda overreacted. Diane said you humiliated her in front of everyone. Why would you do that?" I stared at the screen in disbelief. It was happening, exactly what I feared. Diane had twisted the story, and now my own family believed her version instead of mine. I typed back, "Mark, did Diane also tell you she called a 9-year-old a klutz while she was crying?" He didn't answer. Greg found me pacing the living room that night. "They're siding with her, aren't they?" he asked. I nodded, tears burning my eyes. "She's making me the villain. She always does this. And they let her. Every single time." Greg put his arms around me, grounding me in the middle of the storm. "Then stop fighting for their approval. Fight for Lily. She's the one who matters." And he was right. But it's easier said than done when the people you grew up with, the people you've always called home, suddenly look at you like you're the problem. And this is where I want to pause and speak directly to you. If you've ever felt ganged up on by your own family, you know how isolating it feels. It's not just about the fight, it's about being misunderstood by the very people who are supposed to know you best. That's why I ask you to subscribe. Because here, you'll always find stories that remind you you're not alone in this. Stories that give you strength when you feel like no one's on your side. Days turned into a week, and the tension didn't ease. Diane began posting vague comments on Facebook about betrayal and fake people who pretend to be family. I didn't need to guess who those were directed at. Our cousins and extended relatives started calling me, asking what happened. It was humiliating. One night I finally got a call from my dad. He rarely gets involved in conflicts, but his voice carried a disappointment that shook me. "Claire," he said, "I don't know what's going on between you and Diane, but she's very upset. She feels like you attacked her in front of everyone. Couldn't you have just let it go?" That was when something inside me broke. "No, Dad," I said firmly. I couldn't let it go. Because it wasn't about me. It was about your granddaughter. Diane laughed at her while she was crying. Do you understand that? She made Lily feel like garbage. If you think keeping peace is more important than protecting my daughter, then maybe you don't know me at all. There was silence on the other end. Then my dad sighed. Claire, you've always been too sensitive. And just like that, the conversation ended. I sat there after hanging up, staring at the wall, tears rolling down my face. It wasn't just about Diane anymore. It was about the whole family dynamic I had been blind to for years. Diane wasn't just the golden child when we were kids. She still was. And no matter what she did, they would defend her, excuse her, protect her image. But me, I was on my own. Except I wasn't. 'Cause Greg was there. And Lily was watching to see if her mother would cave, or if she would stand tall. So that night I made a decision. If protecting my daughter meant standing alone, then I would stand alone. Before I wrap up this part, let me leave you with this. Family doesn't always mean unconditional support. Sometimes it means choosing who deserves to be in your life and who doesn't. If this resonates with you, subscribe now, because in the next part, I'll show you how I finally confronted Diane face to face, and how that confrontation revealed something I never expected about my family's loyalty. 2 weeks after the birthday party, the tension in my family had reached a breaking point. I had barely spoken to anyone except Greg and Lily. The silence from my parents was deafening, and Diane's posts online only fueled the whispers among our relatives. But what hurt most wasn't the gossip. It was the feeling of being abandoned by the people I thought would always have my back. I kept replaying that night in my mind. Lily on the ground, Diane's cruel laughter, and the way the guests had quickly slipped away, leaving me to clean up both the mess in the yard and the mess in my heart. Then, out of the blue, Diane called again. Claire, she said, her voice sharp. We need to talk. Face to face. I hesitated. Every bone in my body wanted to refuse. But another voice whispered, if you don't face her now, she'll keep controlling the story forever. So I agreed. We met at a small cafe near downtown. It was a sunny afternoon, but my stomach was in knots. When I walked in, Diane was already there, sitting with her sunglasses pushed up on her head, her phone on the table like a shield. She didn't smile when she saw me. I sat down. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clinking of dishes and soft hum of conversation around us felt like background noise to a storm waiting to break. Finally, Diane leaned forward. You humiliated me, Claire. You made me look like a monster in front of everyone. Clenched my jaw. You laughed at a child, Diane. My daughter. And not just any laugh, you mocked her. How do you not see how wrong that is? She rolled her eyes. You're so dramatic. Lily will forget about it in a week. You always make everything bigger than it is. That was the moment I realized there was no getting through to her. She wasn't capable of seeing her actions for what they were. But instead of arguing, I said something I had never said to her before. I don't want you around Lily anymore. Her head snapped up. Excuse me. You heard me, I said, my voice steady. If you can't respect my daughter, you don't get to be in her life. I won't let you tear her down the way you've spent years tearing me down. Her mouth opened in shock, and for the first time she looked rattled. So you're cutting me out? Your own sister. Do you know what the family will say? I took a deep breath. Let them talk. I'd rather be the villain in your story than the mother who stood by and let her daughter be humiliated. The silence between us was electric. For once, Diane had no quick comeback, no sarcastic jab. She just stared at me, her face hardening before she grabbed her phone, stood up, and walked out of the cafe without another word. I sat there for a long time after she left, my heart racing. My hands were trembling, but it wasn't fear, it was release. I had finally done what I should have done years ago. Drawn the line. When I got home, Lily was in the living room, coloring. She looked up at me with those big, searching eyes and asked, Mommy, is Aunt Diane mad at us? I knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Sweetheart, I said softly, Sometimes people don't treat us kindly, even if they're family. And when that happens, we don't let them keep hurting us. We choose kindness, and we choose people who love us the right way. She nodded, a small smile forming on her lips, and went back to her coloring. In that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. Not just for me, but for her. The days that followed weren't easy. My parents were distant, my brother stopped texting, and Diane kept playing the victim online. But something inside me had shifted. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small around my family. I didn't feel like I had to fight for their approval. Felt free. Because I finally understood. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by love, respect, and the way people show up for you when it matters most. And if someone, even a sister, can't give you that, then they don't deserve a place in your life. And I want to pause here because if this story resonated with you, even just a little, I want you to subscribe to this channel. Not because of numbers, but because here, you'll always find stories that remind you of your own strength. Stories that show you it's okay to set boundaries, even with the people you love. If you've ever felt unseen or unheard in your family, these videos will speak directly to you. Don't miss the next one, subscribe and stay with me. Now, looking back, I don't regret what I said at that party. Those words ended a night of celebration, yes, but they also ended years of silence, years of letting Diane walk all over me. The truth is, sometimes the hardest thing we can do is stand up to family. But sometimes, it's the only way to protect the people who matter most. And in the end, I didn't just stand up for Lily. I stood up for myself. So if you're here, and you've ever felt torn between keeping peace and protecting your own heart, let this be your reminder. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to choose your children. You are allowed to walk away. And if you want to keep hearing stories like this, real stories about love, pain, and the strength it takes to keep going, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Because this may be the end of this story, but it's not the end of ours.